Atlanta Falcons. So their draft obviously highlighted by Bijan Robinson in the first round, number 8 overall. Matthew Bergeron, the tackle/guard from Syracuse in the second round. Third round, Zach Harrison, the edge rusher. Fourth round, Clark Phillips. And then a couple of seventh round picks as well. What was your favorite move that Atlanta made this offseason?
I think if you're going to go, full tilt on everything they're doing, and obviously that points to the run game. They had the highest, rushing rate in the NFL last year. I think that will continue even without Marcus Mariota and with a quarterback in Desmond Ridder that's more of a passer. But I love the Matthew Bergeron pick. I think the thought process here is he's probably your plug-and-play starter at left guard, at least in the outset. Maybe does have tackle flexibility down the road at either spot, but he's a mauler. I mean, you throw on his tape at Syracuse, he is going to have some fun blocks for Bijan Robinson next year. He can pull, he can get out in space, do a lot of different things. You can run behind him. I think he has a decent anchor as a run block, and he's a little bit stronger in pass pro. But nevertheless, like, if you're gonna do this, you better make sure you go all the way and be very stout. Their offensive line is really talented pretty much across the board at this point.
Yeah, and unlike Arizona, where their free agency, their sort of veteran moves were all about just treading water, just get to next year, Atlanta overhauled a lot with their moves. They signed Jesse Bates in free agency, Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree. Taylor Heineke comes in as a backup quarterback / a guy that could challenge if things go off the rails for Desmond Ridder. Scotty Miller, Jeffrey Okudah, the trade that they brought in, Jonnu Smith, the trade. Like, they've done a lot. David Onyemata as well. This was a team that really swung for the fences this offseason in terms of just moving as far forward as they could.
No doubt about it. They spent a lot. I think they bring in some important veterans on the defensive line. Grady Jarrett's been playing by himself the last couple of years. And I think Onyemata Campbell, you mentioned Bud Dupree, just bring in, they have a rotation now too. This new defensive coordinator and Ryan Nielsen coming over from New Orleans. I think they are going to have a different look up front. Even bring over a guy like Caden Ellis, the off-ball linebacker that's kind of a Sam pass rushing, kind of interesting, gadget type piece in the front seven. They're going to be much better in the trenches. I guess we'll pivot to, least favorite, like out wide on both sides of the ball. I have very little faith in their outside corner opposite AJ Terrell, and I have very little faith in their receiving options, outside opposite of Drake London. Of course, a healthy Kyle Pitts, a good player, but they kind of neglected that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite moves for the two of them are both at that kind of position. Not outside corner necessarily, but cornerback. I love Clark Phillips, where they got him in the draft. I think that's phenomenal value for a guy that could easily be a day one starter, quote unquote, as a nickel corner, as your slot guy. And then Jeffrey Okudah as a trade candidate. Like, okay, Okudah's not been good so far in the NFL. I don't know if he's ever going to reach the kind of level that people thought he would be, but that's the kind of reclamation project gamble that I think is absolutely worth taking for any team, but for a team like Atlanta as well, where you're talking about that weakness at outside corner. Okudah may never be that guy, but given what people thought about him coming into the draft, I think it's absolutely the kind of gamble that I would take. Again, I don't see an awful lot to dislike in terms of moves. Like, there's nothing that I would highlight necessarily and say that's a bad move. They absolutely shouldn't have made that. Like, maybe you could quibble with the sheer investment in a guy like Jesse Bates, a safety, just in terms of position value and that kind of thing. But this was a defense that needed talent and needed to be overhauled.
Yeah, I think you could also, I guess, quibble if you're not a Desmond Ridder believer in kind of spending this much on every position but quarterback, and then it might kind of crumble.
Right.
And some of these players are older guys that aren't going to be, 3-4 year pieces. Not that any free agent addition is, but yeah. Now on the Okudah point, I agree. I mean, I think the issue in Detroit also was at no point did he have the expectation to maybe come in and be the number 2. Like, there was never another good corner on this roster. Or now it's like, look, AJ Terrell is clearly the best cornerback on this roster. You can have easier assignments. We're not going to give you, play a ton of press man coverage if you don't want to, all these things. I mentioned Ryan Nielsen. All the Saints did was acquire Ohio State defensive backs over the last couple of years. So they probably know each other already. It makes a lot of sense. I think, the quibble might be just like, what if they do all this spending, Ridder doesn't really take that step, and they're kind of sitting there, they don't have quarterback figured out, and they have an expensive kind of aging roster at a bunch of spots.
Right. So we gave Atlanta a B+ for their draft, a B overall for their free agency, which shook out to a B+ for their entire offseason grade.